Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video we're going to look at one of my favorite, more, say, modern films. Definitely a family film. Definitely very entertaining. But closer to modern, obviously it's not new. It's from 2003. So we're going to be looking at Secondhand Lions. So I love this film. It's very, very fun. It's definitely family oriented. There's nothing outwardly dark about this, so to speak. So there's two stories going on here. The main story is you have Haley Joel Osment's character. He's been dropped off by his mother, who's very flighty. She's the type of mom who randomly drops her kid off for the nearest man. And he's used to this. So he's taking her, it's like, you're going to stay with uncles. He's very comment of, are they actual uncles? Or it's like, they're actually your great uncles. They're my mother's brothers. And essentially they live in the middle of nowhere and they chase off traveling salesmen, usually with shotguns, because supposedly they have a whole bunch of money and they spend most of their lives off in Africa and Europe. And now they're like 80-year-old men, like 78-year-old men, and they're cranky. So they are, what's the other characters? The actors are Caine and Robert Duvall. Their character names, I can get back to them here, are Hub and Garth. So this is Kira Sedgwick plays the mother. So she drops him off. He's about 12, 13. And they live in this house literally in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of dogs and a pig. And he kind of bonds with them. He convinced them to actually start using their money and buying things from the randomly traveling salesman. So they decide to buy a second-hand lion to hunt. So basically these people drop off this very old female lion. They look at it, it's like, we're not gonna kill this thing. So, but they buck up. Shortly after the lion is dropped off, some random family members show up. It's like a couple with their bratty kids. And they're basically periodically show up to harass these guys for their money. Basically, they want to convince them to give them money and be their heirs and stuff like that and want them to die because they want all their money. And nobody knows where this money is at or where they got it. I don't think they really know the backstory. All they know is they came back from Europe, got this house, and apparently have a ton of money. And everybody, all their family members want it. So after this kind of family shows up, the uncles are familiar with them. They're irritated. They usually basically ignore them most of the time. But the lion gets out of the crate. And they had planted, there was supposed to be a regular garden, turned out to be a corn. Turned out they were swindled and it's just all corn. So they don't have a cornfield. So the lion, they go chasing the lion who's ran into the cornfield. Turns out the lion is actually kind of friendly. And it jumps on Walter. That's Haley Joel Osment's character. His name is Walter. And starts licking him. So they decide to keep the lion. The family is irritated because the lion doesn't like them and is growling at them. So they run away. Which, of course, to the uncles, that's a positive thing. It's like, go away. These guys are trailer trash. And they just want you for your money. So they end up getting lion chow in the process. Hub, who single-handedly decides to fight some young guys who piss him off, single-handedly, and throws them around while Garth and Walter kind of stand by and watches this 80-year-old, roughly 80-year-old, I think they may be in their 70s, because the film starts off with Walter as an adult, and he's a cartoonist, and you kind of go back in time, so, and you see what these guys are doing. And Hub essentially nearly has a heart attack. So they end up in the hospital. And that's when, at one point in time, the other part of the story is Garth is telling Walter basically the story of him and Hub's life. They were young. They went off to Europe. Right around the time they were about to leave Europe, they get shanghaied and essentially drafted into the French Foreign Legion. So they fight parts of World War II in Africa. So that's what, that's what it is. I'm going to double check that I'm pretty sure it's got to be World War II, though it could be I'm assuming it's, no, maybe World War I. Let's see. And now it might be actually World War One, just because of how old they are. And I think the story takes place in the 60s. So, but again, they're off fighting. Basically, they're shanghaied. They fight a war. It may have been the World War One, just because it was a French Foreign Legion and they stayed in it. So they pretty much were fighting in Africa. The war ends. I'm not sure. Garth basically goes on and does safari tours and stuff like that, and he takes wealthy people out to do hunts and stuff like that. And he was the academic of the two. Why Hub stays in the Foreign Legion is go fighting and shooting things, because that's what he's good at. But then one day he sees this beautiful woman by the name of Jasmine in the marketplace. Only she's been engaged against her will to this sheik, and he's going to make her one of his wives. And the next parts of the story of him and his brother fighting to get her and free her. And basically she's a magnet. How he meets her is she's absolutely a fantastic horsewoman and a sword fighter. And Hubs ends up chasing her, and they fall in love. And they have to fight the sheik to get her. And that's kind of near the end of that story. And they get into the sheik's palace. They rescue her. They steal a bunch of his gold. That's where the money comes from. And then they leave. And Walter asks, so what happened to the sheik? He's like, they discovered oil on his land. So he just kind of gave up. He was busy enrolling in dough, so he didn't really care. And that's like, well, that's doesn't sound like a happy story. It's like, well, that's kind of the way it happened. And then he asked what happened to her, because he'd actually seen pictures of her up in his kind of attic room. And Garth says she got pregnant, and then both her and the baby died. And so Hub goes back to the Foreign Legion, because that's what he knew. And he stayed that way, and he stayed there until he couldn't any longer, and they essentially came home and started harassing traveling salesmen, and then were dropped off with Walter. So Walter now knows this entire story. Then Mom shows up with a slimy boyfriend, because again, that's what she's known for. They basically try to convince Walter it's like that these guys were part of the mafia or something, essentially, or they were bank robbers, and that's where the money came from. And the guy's a sleazeball. He tries to basically force Walter. He physically assaults him after the uncles, I think, have gone to bed and his mother is somewhere, and forces him. Now, Walter knows where the money is. It's buried below the barn. He found it one day when he was wandering around. And this guy tries to force him to show him where the money is, trying to convince him that these uncles are what they say what they told him, and that they were part of some bank heist, and they should just steal the money because it was already stolen, and supposedly he was part of the FBI, only obviously he's not. And he assaults Walter, and the lion gets out and attacks this guy, and damages him pretty badly, and then proceeds to die of a heart attack, essentially. Because, again, it's an old lion. And so it rescues Walter, and then dies on top of this guy. So he gets a lot of bone crushed, and you see him in like half a body cast. And part of his head is bandaged up. So, yes, it's not realistic, but again, it's meant to just kind of disguise him and deal with that. So, Walter's mother pretty much says, okay, fine, we're leaving, and first she tells Walter that we're just gonna drop him off in Vegas. And then she kind of, when they're leaving, he's sitting in the back seat, Walter's in the front with his mother. And she kind of battles back on that. It's like, oh no, we're gonna kind of stay with him. He's like, he tried to kill me. He's a dickhead, Mom. And she's like, but he has a sweet side. And then Walter proceeds to jump out of the car. And she's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm going back. You can go on your own. It's like, it's not working. This is stable. I like these guys. I don't want to leave. And so that's essentially, this is the best thing she does for her kid, is basically back in her car and leave. And he walks, basically, for the end of the movie, he basically walks down back to his uncle's and basically said, this is what the way it's going to be. It's like, you're going to be part of the PTA, you're going to stop drinking and stop single-handedly fighting people, and you're going to be parents. Which is, and then it kind of goes back, and you have Walter as an adult. He's talking to the sheriff. Apparently his uncles had bought a biplane and died driving it upside down through the barn. They were like 93 years old. So it's like the sheriff's like, they died with their boots on. It was obviously that he knew them, that he liked them. It's like, yeah, you never see the bodies, you never see anything like that. Now, this is actually a change of the original ending. I've read kind of the background. The original ending, apparently, they were basically, the will is read. You hear basically, well, you don't really get the will. Basically, the sheriff pretty much says, so we've looked at the will, and essentially all it says is, from the guys, Walter, the kid gets it all, just bury us in the darn garden with the stupid lion. And that's pretty much all it says. Not surprising considering they raised him. Now, in the original, before they apparently, and I can understand this, they basically show the funeral. And they changed it because that looked bad, and I agree. I love what ended up on screen as the ending. So Walter's standing there, he's an adult, with the sheriff, and this helicopter lands with like Sierra oil on it. And out comes this man, who I can't remember, I recognize the actor. And let me pull it up if I can see the actor, because he was decently known in the 90s. And let's pull up not the Sheik's grandson. Is it the Sheik's grandson? Pull this up, see if this is the actor. I recognize the actor. Yes. So the Sheik's grandson, the actor's name is Eric Ballflower. I knew him from, and really aging me here, The Party of Five. So he was, I think, the oldest brother in that show. But he comes out there with his own kid out of this giant helicopter. He's like, I'm sorry. We were in Houston, and we heard on the radio about these two guys who had died because it was deadly. Two old guys died doing acrobatics in a small airplane. And it's like, I recognize their names. My grandfather used to tell me these amazing stories about Hub and Garth. I think he gives the last name, which I can't remember what it is. And how they were the only men who ever beat him. And he looks at Walter, it's like, so you knew these men? He's like, yeah, they raised me. And the grandson, this is probably one of my favorite lines, he says, so the men in great-grandfather's stories, they really lived. And the adult Walter responds, yeah, they really lived. Which endingly, one, it validates, like, yes, they really did deal with this sheik. Whether everything happened the way they said it was, you have a bunch of old men spinning tales, but they did something of the sort. And that's really where the money came from. And these two men who raised him really did live this amazing, adventurous life. And that's what I find cool. It's like, yeah, they really, really lived. And then, of course, one of the other comments is the sheik's son looks out of the lake and sees a yacht. So I see they spent my grandfather's money well. It's like, yeah, well, there was the salesman. So, and that's how the movie ends. It's a very fun film. So you have part of these flashbacks of this old story of a hero searching for the girl. And it's very much played that way. And then you have this young boy who's listening to this story and learning from these two old men how to be a man. And that's kind of what Hub is trying to teach him, is how you be an honorable man and be a good person. And that's essentially what they teach Walter to be. And he grows up and becomes a cartoonist, and essentially he does a comic strip called Walter and Jasmine about him and the lion. And on the house, and yes, it's molded after the house in the film. It's a fun family film. I mean, there's a little sleazy stuff. There's not really any, you don't really see a lot of violence. When the Hub beats up these guys, essentially you just see them flying. You see them flying, and then he proceeds to talk to them and give them the "you must be a man" talk. You don't actually hear this talk, but Walter asks, like, what is he telling them? Literally, it's like, yes, I beat the crap out of you, and now I'm going to speak to you about lessons you have learned. So, and again, it's entertaining. The acting is obviously fantastic because you have Robert Duvall and Michael Caine, who are absolute utter legends. This is probably one of the last youth films that Haley Joel Osment does. I'll do a double check on this because now he's beardy. He's very, very beardy. Let me pull up his thing. Pull up when he does this. Because this is 03. He's still acting. He's doing a lot of TV stuff these days. Let's see. Back in 03. Go back. Yeah, it looks like he's still doing stuff. Yeah, in 03 he does Secondhand Lions. Then he does video games. And then he takes a couple years off. Because he does some video game stuff in 05. And then he's doing some TV stuff. So he does some voiceover stuff. And yeah, he does video games, voiceover stuff throughout the mid-2000s. And it looks like he has a part in starts really acting again in 2012. And then looks like he's still doing voices. And it looks like he's kind of where he's at. He's doing some TV stuff and some video shorts. But this was his real last youth kind of film, back when he was just becoming a teenager, and so he kind of takes a break from. He's no longer the cute little boy because he was big. I mean, this is the kid who was from doing what was it, The Sixth Sense. So he was a good child actor. Obviously, he seems to be quite fine now. But this was his last kind of adolescent film before he took a break and was doing some voice acting, and then slowly tried to get back into regular acting. He's very chubby and very beardy these days. And of course you have Michael Caine and Robert Duvall, who are legend. Kara Sedgwick does okay. If you're not aware of her, she's partially known she did some TV work, but she's married to Kevin Bacon. At least she was at the time of this film. I don't know if she's still married to Kevin Bacon. I would assume she was still married to Kevin Bacon. I can find her. I think she's still married to Kevin Bacon. But again, I enjoy this film. It's fun. Let's see. I'm assuming she's still married to Kevin Bacon. I'll double check. Doesn't look like she's divorced him. I don't pay attention to this kind of thing. Yeah, still married to Kevin Bacon. So that's who she is. And it's back to the film. It's a fun family film. Like I said, I absolutely love that ending because you really get the sense that, yes, this wasn't just some made-up story. Something happened. You're probably not entirely quite sure because, again, everything is based on stories of a bunch of old men. But, again, you do get the truth that she did there was a whole bunch of oil on his land. That's the reason he didn't chase her. Didn't chase back after them because it's like, I'm busy. I don't need this tiny bit of money. I have tons of money here. But it's a fun movie. It's a kind of adventure story. It's a coming-of-age story. It has a wonderful ending. I like the capstones of the fact that Walter grows up and becomes a cartoonist. And it's fun. And you really get the sense of these men who they lived. And in fact, let's see. The actors who played the youth ones. Let's get back over. I recognize one of them. Let's see. Let's see. Where on earth? The young hub is played by Christian Caine. I'm familiar with him from a TV show called, what is it? I can't remember what it is. He has a tendency to play bad guys, but Leverage, which I enjoyed. He does mostly TV work. He's still very much acting. Yes, he does a lot of stuff. So that's who he is. And then the young Garth is played by an actor that I am not as familiar with. What's a young kid? Let's see. Mostly doing, he hasn't really done much since 2016. But not as active of an actor. But nevertheless, it's a fun film. It's a fun film. It's a fun film to put in with kids. There's not really any educational value to this. It's just kind of a mixture of a coming-of-age adventure film from 2003. It's something to put in probably for the whole family. I mean, really little kids, like my daughter, who's just about 2, is not going to have any interest in films. But probably early elementary would enjoy this. it's going to get more interesting, particularly around the middle school age, and probably even the high schoolers would enjoy this. But this is definitely a family film. I believe it's rated G. So nothing adverse in this. And again, that's accurate G rating, as opposed to some of my previous, the older the videos, the G rating was a little bit fudgier. So, but again, this is PG. So parental guidance, but again, it's still fun. So this is something that you could put in for the whole family. It probably wouldn't, it would entertain everybody. I don't think, you know if you would get a lot of eye rolling with the teenagers in this. I don't know a lot of teenagers, but I enjoy this film. That's the reason I'm covering it. It's a great kind of adventure coming of age story. You get this kind of background of this old story of this guy fighting battles. You do not actually hear them speak. That's the other thing. The young Garth and the young Hub do not talk in the entire thing. It's just completely narrated by Michael Caine, who is fabulous in everything, except for maybe Jaws the Revenge. But he doesn't remember that film either, so neither should we. And again, Robert Duvall, who's been around for decades. He's a fabulous character. He doesn't talk a lot in this film. I'll say this. He doesn't do a lot of talking. Michael Caine does most of the talking, but he has his presence. And then, obviously, Haley Joel Osment was a fantastic actor, even here. And apparently it was shot in sequence. That's the other thing I learned by looking at the MVD page, because his voice was breaking. So he was coming of age and his voice was changing, apparently really radically. Apparently my husband's didn't. I talked to him about that as one of the few young men that I actually know. Apparently his voice does not change radically. I'm guessing Haley Joel Osment's did, because you hear him squeaking in this. So, but again, great film. Not much else to say. I would highly recommend this to any family. No educational value whatsoever. It's just entertaining. I mean, I suppose you could look at some history of the Foreign Legion, or the kind of look at storytelling and how you can make storytelling adventurous. But that would be pretty much it. So that's it for this review. If you like what you see, I have a lot of children's book reviews, family film reviews, a few other, I show my age in this channel, 80s stuff, 90s stuff, scattered throughout here, along with, again, a lot of children's book reviews. I have a splintering of homeschooling videos I do focus on. We are secular, aka non-religious homeschoolers, so I do some of the videos. I do some kids travel stuff, just more kind of our family adventures, but mostly kind of advice, like, okay, this is our experience with traveling with, a toddler. So, have some of those. Let's see, this is November. I have a sprinkling of things everywhere. But basically November, I have, besides these kind of fun films, I have some more series. I have some children's, Native American children's book written by Native Americans, or I believe both First Nations people as well as the Inuit. And if you're not familiar with the First Nations are, they're the Native Americans in Canada. That's just what they're called. There's no difference whatsoever. But that's kind of what else is going on. I have some more, I add in some food bloggy stuff that goes on in January, just because I'm covering food. I'm reviewing a couple food blogs. November, we're going over some Smithsonian Native American resources, as well as these films. And I'm covering the Circle Opens from Tamora Pierce this month. I did all of Harry Potter. That started back in September, along with a bunch of other stuff. Halloween is packed. This month is kind of packed. I'm having a bunch of stuff coming, fun stuff, reviews, movie reviews in December, and a whole bunch more planned. So if you like what you see, again, like and subscribe. I have a ton of stuff already up and a ton of stuff more to come. Thank you.